Welcome back to our virtual summit, Generative AI and the Path Forward in Government. And for those of you that are just joining, hi, I'm Emily, and I'm the Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop. And today I had the added pleasure of also being your moderator. So thanks so much for joining me. And a big thank you to our partners at Box, Carasoft, ServiceNow, SHI, Dell Technologies, and Data Robot for today's summit. So let's get to it because in the first hour, we talked about the challenges in realizing the power in AI. And in this hour, we're going to focus on best practices and lessons learned on government's AI operational journey. But before we get to all of that good stuff, I do have a few housekeeping items to go over with you all. So first things first. There are a wealth of wonderful resources available for you under the resources button along the bottom panel of this session. This is also where you can learn a little bit more about our speakers. If you're looking for that closed captioning feature, just look for that show captions icon, and that's where you'll get that added accessibility. Of course, we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but if you do, send us a message to that Q&A tab, and one of my colleagues will get you sorted out. Of course, you can use that same button to ask questions of our speakers, and we want your questions, so don't you dare be shy. Put your questions in early and often. You can also chat with your fellow Govies using the chat feature along the bottom panel. Finally, we are recording this training, so check your inboxes tomorrow because we'll email you a link so you can watch the entire thing on demand. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's get this show on the road. And to kick things off, I sat down with Justin Iannello, who is the Chief Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence and Health Informatics Officer for VISN 21 within the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Health Department. Here is that conversation. Here to talk about all things AI and healthcare is Justin Iannello, who is the Chief Digital Health, Artificial Intelligence, and Health Informatics Officer within VISN 21 within the Department of Veterans Affairs, Veterans Health Administration. Justin, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Emily. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So this is a big topic. AI and healthcare, they could both be hour-long seminars on their own. So do me a favor and lay the groundwork for me a little bit. How is or can AI be used in healthcare IT?
Yeah, sure is a big topic. Appreciate that question. First, I'd like to state that what has made this possible has been tremendous innovation across the industry. There's some incredible companies worldwide and within the United States, everything from state-of-the-art chips to data centers that are being powered for vast computing resources that are needed on the AI end, to training and certifications that we're seeing for software engineers and even clinical staff. When we talk about specifically within the healthcare industry where it's becoming most popular in terms of examples, I think by far and away in the clinical space is radiology. So you have everything from convolutional neural networks to natural language processing. So let me give you an example. You might have a radiologist who's extremely busy. They have hundreds of images that they still have to read. It is sometimes difficult to tell which of these are higher risk than others. So convolutional neural networks in this setting might be able to cue the radiologist in to say, we see something suspicious on these images, and that will help them prioritize or triage. When we talk about the application of natural language processing, something that's become very common in the healthcare industry, you think about a patient sitting down with their provider in the exam room. You have an AI app on the phone. You put your smartphone down, and the AI listens to the conversation, allows the provider and patient to have a meaningful conversation, and then the AI ends up organizing that into a medical progress note called the SOAP note. Even outside of the clinical space, what I think has been really exciting has been seeing where AI is being applied in the operational space. So we're seeing things pop up from AI being applied to supply chain and logistics, to even supervised learning being applied to areas like patient flow management that will help organizations figure out predictive wise, what patients might need to be admitted, what resources might be needed, and so on. Despite the excitement, we are barely scratching the surface with AI. And at the end of the day, for us as healthcare providers and healthcare leaders, really what we want is AI that's going to be safe, that's going to be responsible, cost effective, scalable, and really trying to help reduce workload burden and help us have more meaningful interactions with our patients.
I love that. So, what is making these moves possible, right? AI is sort of a new phenomenon, also sort of not new, depending on kind of the lens you want to take there. What is making kind of some of the inroads possible right now?
Sure, yeah. So that goes back to what I was mentioning before about everything you need from a hardware to software standpoint. And not forgetting, of course, the people part, because everything is about people, process, and technology. So going back again, you have some big time organizations worldwide and within the United States that have built incredibly powerful chips, data centers that, like I said, are becoming more popular. It's been really interesting to see the vast training and certification opportunities being offered by some big time companies. It's everything from machine learning programming to even in the clinical space, we're starting to see training and certifications even for providers that are more geared toward, chief AI officer positions and so on. So just the infrastructure that we are building and the innovation that's being put forward is allowing people to take these next steps with AI.
I love that. Excuse me. I need a healthcare provider, clearly. All right. So a lot of possibilities here that you just mentioned, a lot that you said we're just starting to scratch the surface and sort of some of the possibilities. What are some of the things that are barriers that healthcare providers and IT especially are facing as they look to incorporate more AI? Because it's not as simple as, hey, let's download this application and get to work. So where are some of the biggest barriers or pain points popping up?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Of course, technology, AI or otherwise, is not going to fix organizational culture and processes and so on. So really, when I think about this topic, and it's a topic I've actually been studying a lot lately, and where we're seeing actually more literature pop up, is it really breaks down into organizational factors and individual factors. So let's start with organizational factors. Everything from healthcare leadership wise, have we thought about what's the identity of what our organization is and what we deliver? Have we thought about that culture? Have we thought about how to take technology where it's sometimes siloed and better integrate it within our workflows and our processes? So the list goes on and on and on there. Now, that might seem obvious, but believe it or not, there was actually a recent consulting reporting agency report that came out that had mentioned that only 6% of healthcare organizations actually have a strategy for integrating AI at this point in time, to show you how challenging it is and how technology is always kind of moving at a faster pace than all of these other factors. Fortunately, what is starting to kind of show up in the literature is organizational readiness AI frameworks. And those that follow these frameworks, that answer these critical questions that I just brought up, are going to be in much better position to reap the benefits of AI and find that return on investment versus others that might fall behind, because if you cut corners or you think technology, like I said, is going to fix people, process situations, that's not going to be the case. Individually, however, that's just as important. And when we talk about the individual factors, how we really reach out to people, how we engage with people, that goes back to your change management, which is easier said than done. So everything from, is your staff aware of organizationally what's going on? What are the priorities? How AI is going to fit into their workflows? We have people on one hand that are extremely excited about AI in the healthcare space. And then on the other hand, we have individuals that are fearful that AI is going to take their jobs. So it's going to be really important as healthcare leaders develop new skill sets in this space to really engage with their staff, get them involved in governance meetings, get them involved in projects, get their domain expertise in terms of where AI is being applied. We really need to see, are people and upskilling and reskilling in this space as a strategic resource that's really critical. Interestingly enough, the National Health Service's AI Research Lab in England, they've actually published a couple of reports recently that's actually really talked about different roles in AI, everything from a healthcare leader to frontline staff to those that are more technologically involved with AI model development and so on. And they've really tried to break down how important the educational groundwork is leading up to those higher levels. So people really need to know what AI is and what it isn't. People need to know critical factors such as if AI is making a prediction, unless it's a randomized control trial, usually it's correlation, it's not causation, and those two factors are really different. So these are really important individual factors that we really try to engage our staff and educate each other on where the potential is for AI, but also knowing where AI is higher risk or where it maybe not be best applied.
Yeah. I think that is so critically important. It's a totally different space, but my parents are all teachers, and they were saying, now none of their students are turning in papers that aren't at least in some way AI generated, right? And at first they were just saying, absolutely not. You can't turn in this paper. It's got AI. But over the past kind of year and a half, they've had to change their thinking. So now they're saying, well, how have you changed your prompt to be, more effective in answering this question? Or how can you use this information and then be a more effective editor? Because you can't go back and put the genie in the box, so to speak, but there are a whole lot of lessons and learning opportunities that need to happen for folks to be able to utilize the technology appropriately. And I think a very different example, but a similar kind of methodology, it sounds like, of what you all are looking at in the healthcare space and where and how it can be applied to be as effective as possible.
Absolutely.
All right, final question for you here, Justin. And it's interesting because we know data is so foundational to AI, right? Without data, there is no AI. So, how do you see organizations using their data in new or different ways to fuel the potential of AI?
Sure. Well, we know data is no secret in terms of how valuable and how rich of a resource it is in the 21st century and certainly moving forward. I mean, it's everything from ETL processes to data mining, data analysis, data visualization, the list goes on and on and on. And of course, we can't have AI with data. So really, when we talk about governance, they need to go hand in hand whenever organizations are really thinking about data in combination with how it's being integrated within AI models. With that said, is that despite where we are today in the healthcare industry, most people still love spreadsheets, and they have their place, but still love spreadsheets. People are still very focused and more comfortable with descriptive analytics, looking at historical data and trying to analyze it and make some sort of future process improvement effort. Now we bring AI into the picture, which is more real time, which is learning on its own, which is providing everything from inferential statistics to predictive and even prescriptive analytics. And when we talk about this kind of new wave of data, people have to get more used to the future state of where healthcare is going. So healthcare organizational leaders are going to have to learn new skill sets. They're going to be moving at a faster pace where while data is being fed into the AI model and it's being making predictions, what we have to remember is that data at the end of the day is data. It's not information, it's not knowledge. So it goes back to that domain expertise, that organizational leaders and providers bring to state what the AI model is telling me. Does this make sense for our current situation? Is this going to help us in the future? Now, when I actually think about examples in this space, there was actually a recent interesting publication that came out concerning patient flow, where supervised learning is being applied. And most people think about patient flow in terms of natural variability patterns and what I mean by that is natural fluctuation. People present to the emergency room, they might need to be admitted, and so on. And we saw the strain on the resources and bed availability during the COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, what some organizations, though, don't realize is that sometimes they have artificial variability built into their system. And what that is unintended siloed processes operationally that might affect the entire system. So you could have scheduled admissions following OR procedures or other medical treatments such as chemotherapy. And when you are creating these artificial variability patterns, you are sometimes introducing siloed operations that can actually create an entire stream for the system. The reason why I bring this up from a data standpoint is that if you were training, let's say, an AI model on patient flow, and you are feeding that AI model data that might be inefficient operationally, AI is not going to know that. AI is not going to be able to explain to you that that's the case. And when we talk about how important data is in this case, data might actually take organizational leaders down the wrong pathway, down a pathway
Hmm.
that actually might potentially make things worse with technology. But when we go back to the fundamentals, when we go back to organizations that really think about, really try to bring together all the parts, culture, our processes, our governance, how data, AI, how everything fits together, and you were really able to clean data up, wrangle data, validate it, and you do those parts first before introducing that data into the AI models, you're going to have a higher likelihood that you're going to have more accurate predictions or more helpful predictions that AI models are giving you as a result of doing that groundwork with the data to start with. So it really goes back to, again, the basics, and it really goes back to organizational leaders and others in healthcare really seeing how the entire system works together as a whole.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate your insights for us today.
Well, thank you, Emily. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Pleasure was all mine. And thank you once again, and hope you have a great day.
Good data and data governance are the bedrock of AI. However, realizing the efficiencies created by AI can sometimes be harder to harness. I sat down with ServiceNow's Jonathan Alboum to hear some real life cases, use cases of agencies who have undergone this modernization effort. Here is what he had to say.
ServiceNow has hundreds of customers across the federal government. While I don't want to go into specific agency names, there are a few examples of the way agencies are using ServiceNow that I want to reference. So, just recently we had a very large federal agency that serves millions of people across the country. They selected ServiceNow to enhance service delivery and improve operations. And they did this so they could replace legacy applications that were driving up costs. So we see a lot of agencies looking to move to platforms like ServiceNow to make their operations more efficient and cut out the cost of maintaining homegrown custom applications. And that is the kind of use case that I see in many different agencies. And another one that I see is represented by an agency, the Department of Defense, that recently selected ServiceNow to connect disparate systems in their environment. So these systems and their data can be made available to officers in a fast and convenient way with a high level of consistency so they can make good decisions in how they operate. And it's those kinds of things that make a real difference when you're serving somebody, where you're serving a soldier, where you're serving an employee, you're serving another government agency. And the serving other agencies is, I think, a model that we should talk a little bit more about. This idea of shared services is in my experience, is really critical to creating an efficient government. We don't need to repeat services from agency to agency when there are things that can be provided perhaps by a centralized service. And I think that's a model that this administration is going to be very interested in moving to more broadly. And we have one of those shared services agencies as a ServiceNow customer that recently decided to modernize their service delivery to their government agencies using ServiceNow. They're able to provide their employees faster and better, and again, consistent and cost-effective services. And they're providing these services to their customers or other government agencies. And I think, again, that's a really important model for us to talk about. And one of the ways that we're going to provide, I think, better service government-wide, from agency to agency and agency to citizen and agency to employees, will be through the use of AI agents. We've talked a little bit about AI, but these AI agents are really, I think, an important piece of our future in government. And they're really these generative AI technologies, the systems that can make decisions. They can do things that a human could do. They could solve problems. They have a level of autonomy in many cases, or they could provide recommendations perhaps too. But we have an agency using ServiceNow AI agents to automate contract reviews, and they're streamlining approvals, and they're going to be lowering their operational costs so their employees can be focused on delivering mission critical services and support, and they can do it very quickly. So those are some examples. There's so many agencies using ServiceNow to deliver on this promise of efficiency, with sometimes with citizen developers using our low code capabilities, other times by using our cybersecurity capabilities for real-time visibility into on-premise and OT and cloud assets. And I think very importantly, agencies are using ServiceNow to streamline permitting requirements. And there's recently an EO on permitting, and I think that's a big opportunity for government to use platforms like ServiceNow to make these complex processes that cut across many agencies standard. And doing it on a platform like ServiceNow creates a real opportunity for driving those changes very quickly and consistently.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate when we can get to the bottom of a use case or example. It really solidifies the realities of these changes. So thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. Agencies cannot move ahead with AI at speed unless they learn to manage the risks associated with it. And failing to move ahead is, well, it's not an option. So my colleague John Monroe chatted with Data Robot's Chad Cisco about how agencies can accelerate their adoption of AI without putting their system and data at risk. John asked Chad about the pressure agencies face as they look to be as efficient as possible. Here's what Chad had to say.
Certainly a lot of pressure to be efficient in government today. And I tell you, we see, to your point, 3 to 4 places where agencies are getting value today from AI. And the first one is financial management. So, actually helping with the financial management. There's a couple places within that we've already had a lot of impact with some government agencies. One is just understanding or predicting your contract spend to allow agencies to say, hey, this contract's going to spend under, let's reposition that money to another contract or spend over and pull it back to make sure you're hitting your budget. And then you can just think about actually running the financial management offices, things like matching transactions, invoices, identifying fraud. We're seeing a number of agencies adopt AI tools to do that. And I mentioned fraud, but fraud can go even much better than that. AI is great at picking up on transactions that don't meet rules, anomaly detection. And so we've had both a number of commercial and government customers actually leverage the Data Robot platform for detecting fraud. And we think that could continue. Two other areas just to touch on quickly then: people management or manpower planning, either at the individual level, say a hospital, VA hospital, could be a military hospital. What's the most efficient way to staff that hospital given a forecast of the demand, and making sure you're both delivering a better customer experience, but at a lower cost. And then if you step out and say, maybe 2 weeks from now, 6 months from now, what's the force structure look like? I'm a former submarine officer. In the submarines, we had a lot of old models to do that in spreadsheets. Now AI can make that much faster and easier for government agencies to predict their manpower and pull the right levers to get the right staff on board. So those are the two biggest areas I think we're already seeing value today from AI.
All right, then let's talk about some of the obstacles to using AI. And let's begin with security. What are some of the security risks that agencies should be aware of when deploying AI?
Yeah. Well, there's the long-standing concern top of mind for most people is just the data breaches. We have a set of secure data, and we want to make sure only the people we desire and the systems we desire access that data. As AI is proliferating, we say, and the number of tools are growing, it's becoming harder and harder to kind of maintain that boundary around your protected data. And then on top of that, the new world of generative AI actually adds a couple additional security risks that agents should be thinking about. First, these large language models are predominantly developed by third parties, civilian industry, or open source. And malicious actors may have purposely mistrain those models to behave incorrectly at just the right time. And so that's a risk to make sure you're thinking about. And then the second one is in the using of those models, maybe you set some guardrails around them to protect what they tell you. And malicious actors can purposely craft prompts that will get around those guardrails. So you're thinking about how's the model trained, and then how is malicious actors interacting with the model. Make sure you have protections on those.
Very devious. So what are some capabilities or techniques that can help agencies address those risks?
Yeah. So as you think about the security, and I mentioned the proliferation of tools, one of the things we think is the most important is having one central platform that manages and governs all of your AI applications. So you can have a real-time monitoring of every model, look for things like malicious actors, look for unauthorized access. And then, of course, that platform should come with robust role-based access control. So each user only has access to the models and then ultimately the data that user should have access to. And then if you take a step back and say, well, how do we make sure the models we deploy are secure? This platform should also have a sandbox or playground environment where we can run models through tests and try these adversarial attacks, see how they respond. And then once we're sure the model meets our security protocols, then we push that to deployment and monitoring.
All right, so another big issue, of course, is AI governance and ethics as part of that. What are some of the key issues that agencies need to address, in developing their governance strategy?
Yeah, I think the most important thing when we think about governance is done right and thoughtfully. Governance can actually be an accelerator to getting AI out in the wild and maintaining the US lead in AI innovation, right? The OMB recently put out a memo that really asked chief data and AI officers to think about themselves as enablers for using AI, not just managing the risk. And so getting this risk versus innovation speed right is, I think, the big challenge. So if you've thought of these governance risks ahead of time, established your frameworks, you're going to be able to move faster. So some things that framework should include: first and foremost, transparency and explainability. Every AI model, we should understand how do we expect it to respond in a given situation. And then when it does respond in deployment, we want to be able to understand why that AI model. So black box models erode trust. So it's really important you use tools and systems that have explainability. And on top of that, you have to think through the accountability of the AI system. Who ultimately is accountable for releasing it into the wild? Who's accountable when it goes wrong? And having that established up front. So when we don't have to ask those questions for each AI model we delivered, we've already thought through. And the last and the most important and the hardest part probably, of course, is what is the ethical alignment and compliance that we as an organization believe in. The AI must align with our societal values. And so it's really important for agencies to think through what is the fairness standards we're going to use, what is the bias mitigation techniques. And then once you've established that, then it's much quicker to put these models into production. And the last thing I would just add on this, one of the things we see many agencies wrestling with is what I'll call shadow AI. It's one thing to establish the governance and establish the security protocols, but then if there's such a myriad of tools and different people are building models in different ways and they're not following your governance, now you've got that risk, even though you've thought through all these things. So really getting kind of wrapping your arms around all the different AI solutions being developed.
Thanks so much, Chad and John. I really appreciate your focus on the pressure agencies are facing to be as efficient as possible. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today for our summit. But before you sign off, I want to thank our sponsors, Box, Carahsoft, ServiceNow, SHI, Dell Technologies, and Data Robot for helping us put on this summit. As always, you can find all our sessions on demand in the conference hall. We will be emailing you a link to the entire virtual summit tomorrow, so you'll be able to access all the sessions again, as well as the related resources. Our goal with these trainings is to provide you with the tools you need to help you do your job better. We really appreciate you spending the afternoon or morning with us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you at our next virtual summit. Bye.